Welcome to Measures of Truth, a His Dark Materials podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
I'm Francis.
And I'm Anya, and today we're discussing the 7th episode of the 2nd season of His Dark Materials, Æsahættr. And we're also doing a mini wrap-up of the whole 2nd season.
This episode was written by Jack the Authority Thorne and directed by Jamie Child.
On this final episode, Lee dies in a shootout with Magisterium soldiers so John Perry can continue on. John finds...
Perry?
Fuck off. John finds Will, realizes his son is the knife bearer, and tells him that he must take the knife to Azrael to fight the Authority. The lone remaining soldier interrupts their teary reunion and shoots John, just before John's demon kills him right back. Meanwhile, Mrs. Coulter is killing some witches, abusing the golden monkey, and kidnapping Lyra to keep her safe. So what was everybody's feelings about this, the finale of season 2?
I was so fucking happy that they fixed my two biggest gripes about the second book, which was Will fighting his father for no reason other than to make a bad biblical allusion to Jacob, and John Perry getting killed by his scorned witch lover from the past. So it makes those two decisions make the ending of this part of the bigger story a million times better, and also incredibly validating that professional TV writers agreed with all of our opinions on the parts of book 2 that sucked the most.
I did notice they kept the insect line just to bother you, and also the bit about the Alamo, presumably also just to bother you.
Yes.
I'm no longer an aeronaut. We're insects now, traveling the world just like all the others.
You couldn't be an insect if you tried, Lee.
Says you, Rabbit. Remember the games we used to play when we were little?
The Alamo.
The Alamo. Taking turns being Danes and French.
They're still coming.
But yeah, overall, I thought this episode was really great. A perfect ending to the season that we've gotten. So yeah, I loved it.
I thought the same. I really, really loved this episode. I feel like at the beginning it was a little slow, but then as everything got going and I got like emotionally invested in everyone dying, it was really good.
I felt
Murder.
the same. Murder. Even doubt, more killing. No, this was great. This was an excellent episode. It set things up perfectly for the next season as well. Like, It felt like there was places to go with it, but it also felt like a good kind of capstone to this, what was been a very good season overall. I loved it.
I complained last episode. I felt like, the elements weren't coming together to it was a really good episode, but it could have been great. And I feel like that this is what the episode was. Like, clearly a lot of energy and time went into making this episode so good. And I think it's honestly one of the best episodes of television I've ever watched, like in anything that I've seen, I think. And, part of that's the serialized story, and we've built up to this moment across 2 seasons. So I just think it's fabulous. It's really good.
So what was everyone's favorite part of this, what we all seem to agree is a really good episode?
So aside from the things that didn't happen that I loved,
Right.
The things that did happen that I loved, the confrontation between the witch and Mrs. Coulter in Cittàgazze. I liked that the witch actor actually got to do something interesting for, like, the first time on the screen. Like, you can really see the moment when she realizes that she's fucked and she's, you know, trying to cover for the rest of the group.
Is Lyra with you? This town isn't safe. You should leave.
And a boy with a knife.
How do you know this?
How many witches are you?
There's only me. I haven't seen a boy or knife.
How disappointing.
Although that, of course, is not what makes the scene. What makes the scene is the interaction between the golden monkey and the specter. From a world-building perspective, we need to see the specter go for the demon, because that's, important for the world-building and the mythology. But the way that they executed that, with the specter threatening the golden monkey and then Mrs. Coulter cutting it off, basically, and sending it away, that was just, so amazingly well done. And then followed up with the scene in the basement of the Tower of Angels, where she kicks the golden monkey and actually, talks to it.
Mm-hmm.
You're either with me or against me. Which is it? If you're against me, you're against Lyra. What are you frightened of?
Huh?
Lyra is special. Lyra is Eve. We must prevent the fall. We have to do whatever it takes to keep her safe.
It really shows that Mrs. Coulter loves Lyra more than she loves herself, to whatever extent she is capable of love. Because when the specter is going after the golden monkey, that's when she is thinking about Lyra and kind of letting that human part of herself exist. But she still is just capable of turning it off. And then, you see that self-loathing later. It's all just so good.
Oh, this is fascinating what you're saying to me. I have not seen the scene in this way. So I just want to be clear about what you're saying, so I'm not misunderstanding you. So what you mean is that you feel that as the specter is getting closer to the monkey, it's her thinking about Lyra, and then she kind of snaps that shut, and that's why the specter can go away.
Yeah, that's how I read that.
That is also exactly how I read it.
Because
cool.
She's talking about Lyra and Eve and the fall, and
yes,
how she has to protect her, and you really see Ruth Wilson lost in thought, and that's when the specter is approaching the monkey and thinking about consuming it, and then you see her snap out of it, and the specter goes away. That's how I read it.
I didn't see it like that, and now I see it like that. It's much, much better.
She's Eve. Eve before the fall. It's time she must not fall. I'll see to that.
For me, it's almost like a scene, I feel like in Jurassic Park. Which is
I
wild.
know exactly what you mean. This is so good. No, say what you mean. I love it.
When Grant and the kid are staying still and the
Yes.
T-Rex is right in front of them, it's like
Yeah.
if you move, it'll see you and get you. So if she shows her humanity, it'll see the demon and get it.
Mm-hmm.
But as she turns that off, it can't see the demon at all.
Yeah. And she has so much control in that moment that she's even kind of fascinated. It's like when she was walking on the edge of her building in the, it's the same kind of thing. Like she's playing with that edge, right? She knows how dangerous that specter is and how close it is. she knows she can close that off at any moment, and she just does it at the last second.
I'll just pick up on another thing that Anya said there, which was that Mrs. Coulter loves Lyra more than she loves herself. To put that in a slightly different way, when Mrs. Coulter is beating her own monkey up, her own demon, that's literally just it's just self-harm.
Yeah.
It's the way that she tortures herself, her toxic feelings about herself, and it's just a physical manifestation of what people do anyway to themselves, like in real life. I just found that fascinating and excellent.
Yeah, I think the TV show has really expanded on what the book was doing and made that demon symbolism and metaphor for self-loathing work even better.
Yeah,
I agree.
Watching Mrs. Coulter beat up the golden monkey makes me like understand what Pullman is doing with the demons here more than like watching Lyra and Pan cuddle each other.
That makes so much sense because it is so much easier to beat yourself up than to be good to yourself.
I feel like the moments in which you are most aware of like your self-conversation and like being kind of split in a way is when you're doing self-harm and like beating yourself up, right? Because like when you're happy, you feel more integrated. You feel just more like a single being. And it's like when you're beating yourself up, it almost feels like a conversation in a way. Your normal self-actualization doesn't quite.
Like, you're right, but that is not my experience of life. It's like, I see exactly the same thing. I see so much of myself in Mrs. Coulter. It's like so many warning bells. But like, she is at her most productive when she is at her most riven. She gets shit done when she is like repressing herself. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's quite a hard scene to watch in a manner because it's essentially animal abuse.
Yeah.
And even though it's not in the story, what we are seeing is a woman beating up a golden monkey.
Yeah.
We find that distasteful when you see it in that physical form, but people do it to themselves all the time and think nothing of it. So I quite like, even if this isn't necessarily intentional, just drawing a little bit of attention to that why is this so bad when there's a physical actualized version of yourself which can feel pain, but you still can feel pain. And you do. That's kind of the point of beating yourself up, is for that pain. So, maybe it gives a point just to give a little bit of insight or introspection and go, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that to myself. Maybe that's actually quite nasty. Would I do that to anyone else? No. So why do I do it to me?
I'm like, what I said sounded so dysfunctional and bad before, but my point was that like a lot of our society lauds that kind of thing, especially like religious society, right? Like I was talking about before, when you use that self-control to repress yourself, right? Like, oh, I want this thing that is quote unquote bad, and I will deny myself and call myself sinner and feel guilty and bad. And then now I'm good. Now I'm a good person because I have torn myself up inside and repressed.
Penitence is a thing in general.
Right.
Like, you have done a bad by our philosophical set of ideas, and ergo you must punish yourself. You must be punished, and you are the person who must do it. And it's literally encouraging those horribly self-destructive ideas.
Self-harm.
Purely purely to continue with a structure of power, which is kind of Pullman's whole point.
Yeah, it's just really well characterized in this particular scene of her in a room that is a church, like clearly like, has an altar and pews and all of that stuff. And this is what's happening in that room. It's showing us, just like you said, animal abuse. It's just showing us this is a bad thing, right? But this is what society tells us is a good thing to do.
I didn't even notice or like make the connection of like being in a religious type scene when that was happening. But yeah, that's a really good point.
So I had a lot of trouble choosing a favorite part because there's so many that I just loved. But I'm gonna have to go with the ending of Azrael's voiceover, because I just think that they did a really good job of surprising us with that. Like, I wasn't spoiled for it. It completely blew me away, and it the way that it went over all the different scenes and brought everyone together, I thought was really well done, since everybody's literally going, like, everyone's alone now doing their own thing.
I have struggled through many worlds to arrive here. But you know this. I have sacrificed things. Things I did not want to. My fight is not with you. But you are the last obstacle between me and my enemy. And if I must, I will raise arms. Again. My fight is with the authority, and those doling out cruelties in his name. Those who seek to divide in order to control. And who have built worlds founded on privilege and divine right, rather than care and need. I fight for freedom of knowledge. And in place of deceit, intolerance, and prejudice, I fight for the possibilities of understanding, truth, and acceptance. But I cannot win these things alone. I will need help and support. From you and all those who have rebelled. Let us be united in heart, soul, and deed, and together we could build a republic of heaven above and a republic of ideas below. Worlds in which the scars of history may be healed. Better worlds where the privilege of freedom becomes the right of all peoples. But I tell you this now. There is no neutral ground. You are either for me, or you are against me. Now, which is it? You're right there, I know you are. Answer me! Answer me!
Azrael.
We stand with you, Azrael Belacqua.
Good. Then let us prepare for war.
Yeah, I got actually like pretty emotional during that voiceover.
Yeah,
and I think part of it is that it's just like very well written and well delivered. And I think also part of it is like watching it at the end of 2020. And like I know that Philip Pullman wrote this specifically as like a screed against the Catholic Church, but I think, I don't know, the way that voiceover was written felt like it applied just as well to the sort of like evangelical dominionist takeover of the American government that has happened over the past 40 years.
It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is.
At its core, it definitely is the same thing. I think there are bits of the book that feel very Catholic specific, like the emphasis on like penance and ritual and hierarchy in a way that like isn't as emphasized in the Protestant stuff, but everything that Azrael was saying in the voiceover didn't emphasize that Catholic stuff. It was more just like how religion is used to oppress more generally.
Yeah. And
yeah, it hit me in the feels in like a fuck 2020 kind of way.
Yeah, and like the music was great. Yeah. And James McAvoy like acted the shit out of that, because you can imagine that he is just standing by himself on a blue screen, you know?
He's so good.
And
it was amazing.
Yeah, he did
also
that
have
really well.
His eyes always been that pretty? Why am I just noticing that
No,
now?
see, James McAvoy is a very pretty person.
Yeah. He's, like I still go back and think about when we talked about the first book, and I was like, hey, James McAvoy, too beta really for me. But every time, man, I'm like, Jesus, he is alpha the shit out of this. Like, he's a really good actor.
Yeah.
I loved kind of that whole speech reminded me so much of Aragorn in the third Lord of the Rings, book and film, where he's talking to the King of the Dead, and he's saying, I am Isildur's heir, fight for me, and I will hold your oaths fulfilled. What say you? And it's very much that same sort of, you're with me, or I crush you. I can help you, we can all help each other, or I crush you.
I feel like Tolkien would hate what you just said.
I feel like Tolkien isn't alive.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's just, I would have made that connection. That's cool.
Since I just re-listened to our talk about the book chapters, I feel like I should point out that we also made jokes about authors' corpses in that episode.
Yep.
But the interesting thing about what you're saying there of the whole, if you're not for me, you're against me, is that, and I thought of Caitlin during that whole thing, is that it is the exact same line that Mrs. Coulter says in Anya's favorite part to the monkey. Yeah. And how Asriel and Mrs. Coulter are like the same person, but are never characterized in the same terms. Like, Asriel is very heroic. He's calling angels out, being like, don't sit on the sidelines. And like, it feels epic and big. And what Mrs. Coulter does feels like very bad and evil and self-harmy, but they're the same thing, like literally the same thing is happening there. It's my way or the highway is like the parents' line in this story about children growing up and coming into their own. And it's like there's something there that's fabulous.
He's a piece of shit as well. Like,
totally.
we do forget it sometimes, but he really is a piece of work.
Yeah.
What I love about the books is everybody else forgets it, but Lyra never does. She's always like, he killed my best friend. Fuck Asriel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, in a season where we complained a lot about voiceovers, this is how you do voiceover, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because it wasn't a prologue. It wasn't giving us information we already had. It didn't have that point. It had an emotional point, and it had like a putting a cap on it. Like, this is the end. We're going to just have this really emotional moment, bring everyone together, including, like, you get a look at the people who've died, and you get a look at Yorick, which was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they chose, I think, the different scenes where they're cutting to all the different characters and the specific words of the voiceover very...
Very well, yeah.
Yeah, very well. Like, I didn't write down specific notes about what they were, but if you go back and watch those choices, like, they are specifically matching, certain words to specific characters that have to do with their journey.
And yeah, it wasn't a voiceover about exposition, which are always bad.
Right. Yeah.
Like, not just in this show. Whenever a voiceover is doing exposition, it does not work.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
All right. My favorite part is, and mine is so different than everyone else's. I really love that Lee makes his last stand, but I feel like in the book, he takes everyone out. I didn't reread the book this time.
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
Because we had the witch to kill John Perry, so we didn't need the Magisterium guy to do it.
So this is so interesting to me because it kind of changes a lot of shades of things, including Asriel's speech, what Mrs. Coulter's doing, how John Perry lived his life, and what is being asked of the children now. It's like Lee makes this heroic stand. He does it on Lyra's behalf, like explicitly, in the middle of all the shooting. He's like,
I don't like taking lives, Hester.
It's ours or theirs.
Theirs or Lyra's.
And he fails, in a sense, like he's awesome and a hero for sure, but he doesn't take everyone out. He does his best and it's not good enough. And the consequences of that are that John Perry dies. Will loses his father. Like, Grumman is telling himself the whole time, like, I'm learning all of this magic and exploring all of these spaces for my family. when he's not there for his family, right? And Mrs. Coulter is going to kidnap Lyra because she is Eve. And Azriel abandoned his daughter because he has to like confront the authority and save the world. There's like all these narratives that these people are telling themselves to like, I have this job to do that justifies this action that is not even being accomplished by the actions that I'm taking. I don't know. It's just Lee failing in there just adds a shade to every other narrative that doesn't happen in the book that I find fascinating. Like it just shifts everything a little bit. It's not just that it makes that plot possibility, you know, that you're talking about where it's a magisterium, you know, like gunner instead of a witch. And so it kind of like fixes that. It does that. But like, I feel like thematically it shifts everything a lot more than if we stuck to the book. So I love that.
Okay, I have a question for you on a related idea then. Because when I was watching that, I also saw something in the fact that Lee sacrifices himself for Grumman, and then Grumman immediately sacrifices himself for his son.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it felt almost like kind of paying it forward in a way. If you felt like that echo there.
I mean, Lee is dying for Lyra in his mind. You know, he's dying for his kid, and Grumman is dying for, I mean, John Perry is dying for spoilers. It's John Perry is his father. Is dying for his kid.
That is confirmed in this episode.
It is. Now. When did that happen?
Oh my God, it was confirmed long ago, okay?
Did you know that Will's dad played Moriarty on Sherlock?
Are you kidding me? Yeah. No, I think there is an explicit connection there. You know, he sees Lyra. That's, if he could have a daughter, it would be Lyra, and he dies for her, and Grumman dies for his child. You compare that to Mrs. Coulter or Azriel, who like abandoned his child for her own good in his mind, and then kidnapped her child for her own good in her mind, you know? So I think there's something heroic versus villainy going on, you know, like our...
So it sounds like your favorite part was the whole fucking episode.
I mean, it's really good, but I feel like that moment links to every other moment, you know, that we put failure there instead of success is fascinating to me, with the relationship that failure has had in this season.
It's interesting because I suspect their motivation for that was money. Because in the book, he blows up one of the Zeppelins and kills them all that way. And obviously, they didn't want to do a big-ass explosion like that.
And these guys were like, oh, I've been hit. Yeah.
So it's interesting
the same
how...
guy multiple times.
Yeah.
How different motivations can produce good results.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely. My favorite bit was exactly the same thing, so I don't actually have anything to add. Alan just said what I was going to say, but better. No. You just saw more of the stuff that made it good for me. Sorry, did he get shot in the ankle in the book? I don't think he did.
No. So this is a reference to something that I wrote in the doc, and I wanted to ask people what you thought about Lee getting shot in the ankle first, because I think it makes his decision to stay and kind of like sacrifice himself a little bit less meaningful, because in the book, they both, in theory, could have run together, or John Perry could have stayed and Lee could have run ahead to try and like pass the word on. But in the TV show, you know, he got shot and was limping, so he was basically immobile, you know. Like, he wouldn't have been able to try and outrun them. They couldn't have swapped places. So I think
it made a choice. It made a choice.
Yeah, it's less of a choice there and more. I mean, he is, you know, using his skills and going out in a brave way, but it's, you know, he was cut off from other options that he wasn't cut off from in the book.
It didn't bother me because they still showed him able to move and walk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't like he couldn't have tried. I don't know. It didn't bother me. In fact, I thought getting shot in the ankle was stupid and useless because they still show. Because if you actually had a bullet in your ankle, you could not move the way he was moving.
Your pain would be huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm being a little bit passive aggressive about this. This is basically me complaining. Like, I feel like they should have had it, like, grazed his thigh or something, you know?
Yeah,
like,
no, agreed, because that's how they used it.
Yeah. But, like, having him get shot in the ankle, I feel like it doesn't work. It makes his choice less meaningful, and I wish they hadn't done it. I should have put that as my least favorite part. Wait, we haven't done that yet, even though it's been like half an hour. It's not too late. Well, should we use that as the transition into our least favorite part?
Least favorite parts.
I didn't have this written down, but I guess my least favorite part is Lee getting shot in the ankle, because it's the only bad part in what would otherwise be a perfect scene.
Great.
But what I actually did write down was just that the witch cold open, like, they're getting kind of cliche at this point. I think over half the episodes of the season have opened that way. Like, it wasn't terrible, but the rest of the episode was so good, so it still stands out as the worst part.
Yeah, mine is also witches related. Surprise, surprise. I despised the scene with Ruta and the cliff guests.
Which is the same scene I'm talking about, I think. I'm pretty sure that was the cold open.
Yeah, that's the end of the cold open, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I specifically Ruta and the cliff guests because in the first season, which we talked about a lot, they made it so that nothing can kill the witches. You know, when Serafina went into Bolvangar and just murdered everyone super quick, Ruta could have done that to the cliff guests. So she was never in danger, although we were obviously supposed to think she was. We were supposed to feel that she was. So that's just dumb. Like, that's just consequences of bad writing from last season. And B, like, we don't need that scene. We know what Æsahættr is already. In the book, we didn't know what it was when we had that scene. And it wasn't later when we put it all together that she was actually looking for the knife when she abandoned the knife. And it was interesting because everybody was underestimating these kids and thinking that they weren't. Like, the witches knew that Lyra was important, but what it showed was that there's the prophecy and the witches want to do that, but they still have no fucking idea what's going on. And it was interesting. And this scene just did nothing.
It was also weird, the, like, kind of language that they're speaking, that they made that choice too was, like, really weird to me.
It was just growls.
Yeah.
TV show Ruta is still way better than book Ruta.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I wanted
100%.
to ask you about that, Caitlin. Like, I mean, I know the witch scenes have been some of our least favorite throughout the season, but as a character, like, I thought Ruta was actually fine, which is awesome. And I just wanted to get your take on that overall.
I mean, I can never like her because I know her roots. You know, and
Good.
And anytime she took stuff that Serafina did, I just felt resentful. Like, she's too wrapped up in how much I hate her in the books. I cannot have
I see.
an opinion about her.
An
in the
impartial,
TV show. Yeah,
just
exactly.
TV show opinion. It's like impossible to separate them.
It did also feel kind of weird when she just came back and the whole meeting the angels and going to see Asriel thing. Like, I know that was meant to be another episode. Mm-hmm. But they didn't, like, show it. Like, that is still a really impactful scene when she meets the angels. It tells you a lot about Ruta. It tells you a lot about the angels. And it just wasn't there. She's just like, oh, yeah, I went to see Asriel, by the way. And, yeah, he said this, this, and this. And then exposition dump. You go, well, you could have at least shown something about that.
Like, the real point of her finding out about this, in terms of the plot, is for Serafina to lie to her. Because she's like, we got to find this thing because now Asriel is our boss. And Serafina's like, never heard of it. You should go find it because I don't know where it is. It's not right here, you know, with us right this second. You should go somewhere else and find it. Yeah.
Well, she doesn't know the knife is called Æsahættr, does she?
She gets a look on her face while she's describing, like, what this Æsahættr is and like what it can do. And she's like, oh, and she's like, yeah, you should go find that somewhere else. And she's like, I will. Goodbye, my sister. And she's like, thank God. Thank God she fell for it.
There was something else. As I was traveling, I came across some cliff ghasts. They spoke of the Æsahættr. Something that will be the difference between winning and losing. I'm not sure where to begin, but...
Go. Find Asriel this Æsahættr. Make his fight yours. She's gone. To Asriel.
And again, I do really wish we'd gotten the scene where Ruta meets the angels. I think that would have been a good way to introduce the fact that they're going to check out Asriel, like, and also introduce that they're going to be characters in the story and not just these omniscient, you know, things through the cave or the alethiometer or whatever. But I understand, you know, COVID fucked it up.
It
sucks, but I'm not upset about it.
Yeah.
My least favorite part was the witch death, which I just found.
Wait, which one?
The
one that I loved.
That one. I loved the bits about it that you loved. I loved
the betrayal. The
overall thing sucked, in my opinion, and the reason it sucked for me was that I didn't understand really why I keep wanting to say Ruta, that is her name, but Coulter, why Coulter is there. So when that threw me off, then we already had one random suddenly suddenly
it's
Mrs.
because
Coulter
Ruta is so close to Ruth.
Yes,
Which is her real
and
name,
because
right?
Seraphina's played by Ruta as well, which just means yes. So that fell off for me already. So I was already a bit like, what is this? And then combine that with, and then another witch turns up in exactly the same place. The one house in this entire bloody city, she turns up there. And then she's naive enough to not go, whoa, why are you here? Like, she knows the people here don't have demons. I'm sure that's addressed prior. There's just no critical thinking. Like, yeah, she's earnest, I would say, to the point of being naive. Like, and also she can turn into like ghostliness and fly away. Why wasn't she at least positioning herself to vaguely be able to do that?
That's
like,
the real problem.
Even if her reactions don't make sense to me, and so she dies for it, and that makes the death list impactful because it feels like it could be easily avoided.
Like by following what happens in the book, which is like carefully calibrated to trap the witch.
Yes, exactly. And also just after she kills Boreal as well, so you see that Miss Coulter has just gone on a killing spree, essentially. And in here, it just doesn't quite feel like that. Like, I know they are normally the same point, but they're shown in the same scene in the book.
Yeah.
I see. So your main problem with the scene is just that the witch is too dumb, and
yeah, it makes the witch dumb.
That makes you question everything, because it's like, even though what's there is like good, it doesn't feel believable on some level.
Yeah. I feel like it does a disservice to the witches and to their characters by making them relatively consistently wander into really simple traps. And you look at it, you're going, well, if they had an ounce of sense, they wouldn't have done that in the first place, or they wouldn't have gone alone, or anything like that. Like, there are very simple ways to get around these problems, and it all seems to be they just stumble in by not thinking.
Okay. I will buy that, but I am going to push back a little bit on, like, the coincidence of Mrs. Coulter finding the house where Lyra and Will were staying, because, like, I don't know, the city doesn't look actually that big, and I liked that they were kind of reusing that set and having Mrs. Coulter actually retrace Lyra's steps a bit more, because to me it felt the world feel more real. You know, in the book we don't get any of that because we're not following Mrs. Coulter nearly this much, and so she just kind of shows up and we don't have to have a reason for knowing why she's there or how she's tracked Lyra. And so it somehow works to show her like actually tracking Lyra down and like confirming like, okay, yes, she is in this world. Now I have to go find her.
I do agree that it definitely serves a story point. I just didn't like it.
Okay.
I like the. Okay, I will say, I was kind of meh about that scene. Like, I didn't hate it or like particularly like it. It was fine. What I did like in that scene is when the specter is approaching the two demons, and the monkey just holds up the witch's demon by the neck.
Yeah,
I thought
that was really
fabulous. Funny. And then the specter just like consuming it. That was really good. I liked seeing that.
Oh, absolutely.
And how Mrs. Coulter is making the witch watch.
Yeah.
That bit I liked. Yeah. But I see cool. What you're saying, because also, like, if you're a group of witches, adult women in a world where you've just discovered that these things can kill you and there's nothing you can do about it, and you know that there's a shit ton of them back in the city, and then somebody's like, oh, there's a lady there. You're like, well, too fucking bad for her. Moving on.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly. Though I must say, in that scene, I loved the sound design of the spectres.
Yes.
The fact that you could it was incredibly visceral. It was very kind of foreboding, quite unnatural, and all of those things really gave a sense of menace to these things, which if you didn't have that and you just had the look of them, it wouldn't have any of that menace.
Yeah.
It was very well done.
Stop whimpering.
They are cool. My least favorite part is just a weird thing that happens in the episode. I think it's the right emotional choice. I think it's visually like epic and interesting. It's just when Will is cradling his father's, dying body and crying, and I'm crying, and then we like are zooming out over the jungle and he is on a cliff edge, and I'm like, how did he get there? It looked like he walked right over. What? When did that? Why? So like, it just threw me out every time. I don't even think it's bad. I just think it's like, it's just how my brain works. I was like, I don't understand. How did he walk there?
I agree. Like, there might have been another tunnel through the cliffs. I don't know if tunnel is the word I'm looking for, whatever, coming from the side. But even if there was, he was definitely like storming away from his father towards the cliff edge, like during that scene. And you can't see the cliff edge until you pull out. You're like, where was he planning to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely pulled me out every time also. And being like, wait, that doesn't make sense with the blocking that they had in that scene. Why have they made this choice? It is very strange.
Yeah, it reframes everything that happened before in a way that I don't think they want it to. It plays in that moment perfectly. Like, that is how it feels when someone dies, but like a nitpick. Because I really love this episode, so I tried to pick something that's dumb.
All right, we've got a problematic this week, I see.
Yeah, I just noticed that the two sidekick witches who actually get named, I didn't go back and look up their names. But at least they have names, I guess. They're women of color. I think their performances are really good in both of their death scenes. The problem that I had was that they have death scenes, which mainly serve to raise the stakes for the white characters, which is like a horror trope that is really old at this point and has been complained about a lot. And so I feel like the plot is indulging in that. It's not so bad, though, because we do have people in the cast who are main characters, important characters like Amir Wilson, Daphne Keane, and Jade Anuka, who's playing Ruta, who people of mixed race heritage or people of color, and they're main characters. So like, this mitigates it a lot, but like, it is a trope that maybe we should not do that.
Yeah, I agree. I had the same thought. At least we're not seeing colorism, which is also very common in TV and movies, where the two witches of color who die are much lighter skinned than Jada Nuka as Ruta, who survives. So at least there's that. But also, like, I don't know. I mean, like, I know Daphne Keane, her mom is Spanish, and she has, like, some Arab Moorish heritage going way back. But I mean, like, whiteness is socially constructed, and like, definitions change over time. I feel like I'm uncomfortable using Daphne Keane as an example of diversity because I think she's probably read by casting directors and most viewers, like, as white. I don't know.
I will say because of, well, the pretty good job that they've done with casting, I didn't notice it as much. But yeah, it does suck. So before we move away from our, like, specific topics too far, I did want to say this wasn't my least favorite scene or anything like that, because I thought Lee's actual death was fabulous, and especially the second time I watched it. I don't know why it hit me harder the second time. I cried a lot, but I really fucking hate that they didn't have Hester curl up on him. Like, I get the budgetary concerns and how it's easier, but that they weren't even touching when they died was some bullshit.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out there. Other than that scene was fabulous in a heartbreaking way.
It was. It really was.
As far as Lee's death goes, I'd be curious to ask non-book readers how surprised they were by it. Because, I don't know, I think he felt more protected to me as a character than either John Perry or Lord Boreal did. So I feel like maybe aside from Roger, Lee's death would have been one of the more surprising ones so far. I did pay attention to Mrs. Coulter's outfit this time, and it is very stylish and fun, but when I see that style of outfit, like, all I can think of is just, like, she looks like a colonizer.
Yeah, it's 100%.
100%. The Jungle Cruise ride at Disneyland is the same.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I just, like...
It's turn of the century explorer.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, when you were describing it, you were using words that, like, had that implication, but because you didn't specifically say that, I, like, didn't connect it in my head because I didn't have the mental image. And I think the Magisterium soldiers definitely give that vibe, too. So, yeah, just, like, lots of colonialist imagery that I think is absolutely on purpose. Like you already pointed out last time, I'm just catching up and wanted to say that you were right.
It's good. It's good to point it out blatantly without me just making Disneyland jokes. But that is what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do not get it from the soldiers at all. Their whole style and the way that they're made up is much more World War II. They're using M1 Garans. They're using those sort of steel helmets, kind of, again, a bit like the German style. They're much more covering than the British or American styles from World War II. But that same sort of colouring, the weapons they're using, this is all very much more World War II than it is colonial era. Lee is using a repeating carbine, which is, if not directly modelled on, then certainly alluding to the Winchester.
Yeah, I noticed
which is
that.
a classic rifle from like colonial times, spreading west. There was a lot of things, and that was one thing that was sold, traded to some of the tribes that they were looking to conquer, both physically and also culturally, and they would trade them because they're easy to use from horseback because they're really short.
Right.
Okay, yes, I agree with you. The Magisterium soldiers had like a very World War II kind of like Iron Cross vibe, but like the colonialist era lasted for a very long time, and like parts of World War II were fought in tropical areas. And so for me, it was like the juxtaposition of World War II era outfits with like a very tropical looking jungle. Like that wasn't just a forest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like being overdressed and like having that kind of like oppressive European military outfit in like what was very a tropical setting still reads as colonialist to me.
It feels to me like something you're saying there, Anya, which I would not agree with, is that colonialism ended.
Oh, well, no, that's true.
So, like, I just want to put that out there.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, it's, maybe I misspoke, but I was trying to say actually the opposite of that, that, like, colonialism was not just that explorer chic, like, late
1890s,
late 1800s,
Yeah,
early 1900s. Like, yeah, it extends into, like, the 40s, 50s, and even today.
No, I agree with that. I think possibly they are two different parts of colonialism more generally, like the initial expansion versus the repression and the kind of doubling down and consolidating, which was much more a hallmark of the 40s and 50s, whilst the initial expansion was much more the sort of rich white explorer in the middle of the jungle.
Yeah.
That's what I could only call her Ruta. She's not Ruta, she is Miss Coulter. That is what Mrs. Coulter looks like. She looks like that turn of the century versus the troops, who look very much more like that consolidation of power in the kind of mid-1900s.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
100% agree.
Yeah. While we're on Mrs. Coulter, I just want to throw in that it's so horrifically unnecessary, but I loved her, like, power shot. You know, at the top of the tower.
At the angels?
With the specters.
Oh, fuck, yeah, that was so cool.
Like, it added nothing except enjoyment, and I am here for it.
It was good. So I don't really have a religion thing, but I did want to talk about existentialism, because I think the way that they're using the demons in this episode is very, like, existential.
It's almost like these books are your baby existentialism introduction.
Yeah.
You know, like, you're not quite ready for...
Baby's first existentialism.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. Thank you. You're not quite ready for Charté or whatever his name is, but soon.
I love it, yeah. No, I think that's right. It's, if you don't know anything about existentialism, you would read these books and then go on to, like, read Simone de Beauvoir and stuff like that and be like, this seems familiar for some reason. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, you have all of these characters who are speaking to their demons, which is really just them talking to themselves. And we've talked about how good they've been about this season with doing that, and how that is the way to use the demons, right?
Yeah.
You already alluded to, Anya, how the end of the second book got very biblical very fast and feels, like, weird, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like the show swerves so hard from that into this more philosophical territory. To explain to people, like, what existentialism is, because I don't think that this, at least in America, it's not taught at all. It's part of, like, scary postmodernism, which is clearly a bad thing and should be exterminated. Existentialism kind of has one rule for it's a philosophical model that only, you know, like, in terms of ethics, it doesn't have, like, a system of, like, lying is bad and things like that. It just really has one rule, and that is you don't talk about Fight Club. No, that's different. You have to authentically be yourself and listen to your conscience, and, like, be aware of when you are lying to yourself, and don't do it. Don't indulge in that. You have to have, like, moral integrity is what it's all about, and not in the sense of, like, I follow these rules and my code of ethics, like, you know, down to the letter. It's listening to this core of yourself that knows, like, what I'm doing right now is bullshit, or I don't really trust this person that I'm dealing with, but I'm acting like I trust them because they haven't done anything yet to, like, you know what I mean? Like, you get a feeling, but you don't go with that feeling. That's not existentialism. That's the opposite of existentialism. You're, like, not going with your gut. And to a lot of people, that's scary in terms of, like, you know, structures of authority, because then they're like, well, what if your gut tells you to murder everyone, or to, like, constantly have sex with people you're not married to and things like that? What would happen to society if we lived that way? Like, clearly we would all rob each other and murder each other and just sex each other to death. That would be the worst. And, like, you know, maybe you're telling on yourself, person in authority.
I was going to say that exact thing. Like,
yeah.
I find it so interesting how so many religious people are like, but without God, we would just murder people. I'm like, I've actually never believed in God. He's never been a part of my life. And I have never wanted to genuinely murder someone. Like, never in my life has that been a thought that crossed my mind in a genuine manner. There have been people that I've thought, oh, the world would be better off if they died. Like, well, I'm sure we can all think of some political examples. But I would never, like, it's never even, I fucking hate that argument so much. Like, fuck off. Sorry.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem like the impulse that just springs from you in a situation, right? It's like constructed out of a lot of other, points of pressure when murder happens. And it usually has a lot more to do with repression and not working things out. That's existentialism. The one rule is listen to Jiminy Cricket and do what that motherfucker says.
I'd be okay with worshiping Jiminy Cricket, but
But so if you have that in mind, think about these interactions that we see between Pan and Lyra, right? With Pan talking to Will, with Mrs. Coulter. Now I want to call her Ruta. What the fuck, Francis?
I'm so sorry.
With Mrs. Coulter and the Golden Monkey, that is like an example of repressing what is deep down inside of you, that little voice telling you, do this, don't do that. Like, what exactly is the monkey not on board for when she's like, oh, she's Eve, I have to stop the fall. I have to, and the monkey's like, not signing up for this. This is bad. Like, what is that about? And, what is that part of Mrs. Coulter saying to her that she is saying no to?
Now, my read is mostly book-based, and to be fair, they are... they could be doing something completely different in the show, but taking that scene with an understanding of the character in the book, I've always thought that the monkey represents the evil parts of Mrs. Coulter, I guess. And, like the monkey is her, so it's hard to say, like, there's a wall, because or like a line in the sand. The monkey's evil, the body is not. Like, that's not quite what I'm saying, but... I sort of read that as the monkey being like, this is not our problem. Like, fuck it. And Mrs. Coulter saying, no, this is our goddamn problem. Because maybe this is me thinking more about book 3, but in book 3, she does struggle to do good things. Maybe, or bad things for good reasons, or something like that. Like, and she really struggles with it. And she never quite knows what side she's on, except that she wants to help Lyra. And so that's how I read this.
Interesting. I can see how you pulled that out of this scene in the TV show, but I feel like in the entire rest of the show, the monkey has more been representing Miss Coulter's more vulnerable and, like, better parts, actually.
Yeah.
And I see her mistreatment of the monkey as, like, suppressing the good and compassionate parts of herself. So I didn't pull that out of the scene just because I think it contradicts everything else that we've seen so far. So I kind of want to go back and rewatch that and see if there's a different interpretation.
I kind of agree with you there, absolutely. But why would the monkey then not want to help Lyra? Like, because I believe Mrs. Coulter thinks that keeping Lyra away from everything, like kidnapping Lyra the way she does, I think she genuinely believes that is helping her. I think she's thinking, I'm going to keep her safe from all that.
I would say the monkey in the book, I think you're completely right about this. And it's actually what we just talked about, right? Where the monkey in the book is like, she is repressing the truth of what she is in every situation. And the monkey, like, can't help but exhibit what that is. And so she has like a smile on her face and is sweet as sugar. And then the monkey is like murder, right?
Yeah,
looking
exactly.
at you.
Yeah.
There's a specific, like, this doesn't really spoil anything plot-wise, so I'm going to say it now. But there's a specific scene in book 3 where, like, Mrs. Coulter is just sitting around looking like a normal person, and the monkey catches a bat out of the air and then breaks its wings. And then, like, just tortures this bat. Did I say bat? Yeah. And just tortures this bat to death. And that's while Mrs. Coulter has Lyra in her keeping and is, like, trying to keep her safe. So that, I guess, is where I'm coming at from the monkey and from that situation.
Yeah, and it's exactly what we just talked about, where it's like the religious person who's saying, like, we can't be existentialists because then you would just murder everyone. And it would be like, what's in your heart there, person who is saying that, who, you know, like that's what's inside of her, right? In the books, like literally. It's just trying to get out, and she is controlling herself so that she can exist in society and kind of satiate those appetites to the degree that she can exist at all, you know? I definitely think that's how the Golden Monkey operates in the book. I don't read it that way in the show. I think it's used to like show vulnerability on her part, and especially like we talked about the animal abuse, you know, of that situation and stuff.
I mean, the monkey still does commit violent acts sometimes, right? Like in season 1 where it pinned Pan into submission in a pretty painful way.
In this episode, when it offered the witch's demon up to the specter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like in the TV show, whenever the monkey is being bad, it feels like the monkey and Mrs. Coulter are on the same page. And when they are divided, the monkey is the more vulnerable, more human, compassionate part of her.
I don't know. Like these are my own personal associations. So I think I'm projecting some stuff onto this, but like she kneels down on the floor and she's reaching out to the monkey, and it is like very wary of this show of like acceptance and affection. You know,
it doesn't believe her.
Right. And it literally just got kicked across the room, which is why it needs to cross the space back to her invitation of like love and kindness and stuff. And so like, I don't know. I've been in that situation as a child, being reached out to by a parent of like, who just like beat you up and is like, now this is how abusers work. They hurt you. And then they're like, okay, now I love you. And now you need to like forgive me and accept me. And like everything needs to be cool now. And so for me, it's like the monkey is seeing that like you are going to do to her what you're doing to me. And I don't want that for her. Like, I love Lyra too, in a way of like, I understand what you are and what you will do to her what you're doing to me. And I don't want that. And so she's saying like, be with me or you are against me in those, you know, in that way. That's how I read the monkey's like schism in the scene.
I guess I just like the monkey better in the books because it exists just as this evil, terrifying thing.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a demon, literally.
Yeah. And that's how I continue to read him, just because I like it.
Is that just because Mrs. Coulter is a psychopath?
Yeah. I guess.
So her demon is also... There are plenty of people who have mental health issues which cause great pain and harm, but not to anybody else but them.
Yeah.
And that's the majority of people with mental health issues.
Yeah.
Coming from someone with mental health issues here.
Yeah.
So to zoom back out on this whole, the main point I'm making with Mrs. Coulter here is that she's definitely not listening to herself, you know, like in an existential sense. And I think that contrasts with like the conversation that Lyra has with Pan, where they're talking about, you know, that she feels that she's changing and that means that Pan will stop changing.
I loved that scene a lot.
It's so good.
It was so good.
I think I'm changing, Pan.
I like you just as you are.
Once I change, you'll stop changing. What do you think you'll be?
A flea, I hope. Is it Will that's changing you?
A bit.
I don't think I'm ready for things to change.
I don't think anyone ever is.
And a good example of a way to have demon exposition unawkwardly.
Right. Mm-hmm. We're getting the world building there of like, you're going to settle into a particular form. And they do that sardonically, humorously of like, I hope I'll be a flea.
Yeah. Oh. And we got Red Panda Pan one last time, which I assume we won't get at all next season. And I'm already sad and I love him so much and just want to pet him and hug him. Sorry, carry on.
I also really enjoyed their discussion about change, and Pan saying, I'm not ready for change, and Lyra kind of saying, well, kind of doesn't matter if you're ready for it.
Yeah.
Yes,
no one's ready
so
for change.
Good.
Which is a huge part of existentialism. It's like
and a huge part of growing up, which is what these books are about.
Yeah.
So
there's
good.
like all this fear, and there's all this like, I'm not going to fit in, and you have to take responsibility for all the things that happen to you, even if they're not fair. This is a huge part of existentialism. And even if they're like unfortunate and they're set against you, because by taking responsibility for them and like making them a part of your identity, that is, you're allowing yourself to fully exist in the truth. And then you can make authentic decisions about who you are given this information. Like, even though you can't control that your father was just murdered by a random Nazi who appeared in the background, you like have to decide, am I really the knife bearer? Do I have to take up his mantle? Do I have to do all these things that I've been told are my identity? Like, is that true about me? Everything that everybody is telling me I am? Or am I, some other thing that, like, am I the person who makes Lyra stronger and who allows Lyra to make me stronger and is my best friend? Am I her best friend and I care about her the most? Or do I care about my father's legacy the most? When it comes to Will, the conversations that he's having about his existentialism with Pan.
Bad dream.
I'm frightened. I saw my father and I was scared.
She can't see the fear. Your fear.
Can't she?
She thinks you're the bravest fighter she's ever seen. As brave as Yorick Bernison, king of the armored bears.
Oh, Bernison. That's a compliment. And I think Lyra's even braver than me.
She can be. But sometimes she's not.
She's the best friend I ever had. You know that? Not that I've had many friends.
You're her best friend too. Now sleep. Maybe you'll feel better in the morning.
Who is he? His identity that he's constructing revolves around relationships with Lyra and, between them. The way that the authority of the grown-ups is operating, like Lyra wants to let Serafina kind of take control of things, but she realizes in this episode, especially talking to Pan, we can't do that. Like, we have to protect the grown-ups. We're the only ones who can do this in this world.
The specters could hurt her. She's not safe.
Everything's a risk, Lyra. Haven't you learnt that by now?
No. What I've learned is that we make mistakes. I don't want to make a mistake with either of these people.
And that is like taking responsibility for who you are and then making choices. And, those choices might turn out to be failure like they are for Lee, but you've like fully embodied who you want to be and trying to be who you are, as opposed to repressing yourself like, say, Lord Asriel, who is like, I'm not your father. I'm the world's hero and I command angels to appear before me and do my will. And it's not my fault that global warming's happening back on my world. I opened a portal to bring light to people's eyes, and I'm not responsible for my actions. I am saving the universe, you guys. Come on.
May I say, when you brought up that scene where Will is talking to Pan about who he is and that, like, I really liked how they did that scene here. It was very good. But the way that you just said it, I realized, and this isn't the only scene where it happens, that Will is using Pan, and Pan is perfectly willing to do this, as his own demon.
Yeah.
And I just love that. I love that realization. That's such a good character moment for both Will and Lyra / Pan. Mm-hmm. That's really good.
It feels so intimate. And I think they've really built up yeah, they've earned that, I feel like.
Yeah. And I really love how afterwards when Pan goes back to Lyra, how she's very clearly wide awake. And
yeah, I love that.
It gives this idea that she sent Pan over there and was like, we'll need somebody to talk to. Could you?
Yeah.
Yep. So I just the main thing here that is happening, I just want to be clear, is like, existentialism kind of ground rules. Be authentically yourself. Take responsibility for everything about your life, even the things that aren't fair. And then, intentionally be who you are and be honest with yourself about what your conscience is telling you and do your best to do that.
Argue with anything else, but don't argue with your true nature.
And it's very hard. It is the hardest way to live your life. It's so funny because like this is the thing in postmodernism that people are like, this is bullshit. This is just an excuse to do whatever you want. It's like, if you actually do this, it is so hard to live this way, but it's like the best way to live, I think. It's just like impossibly difficult though. And it's you live your life in a way where you will fully like feel everything and, all the good, all the joy, but also all the loss. And that is where these books live, like when they're at their best. And this episode is like, that's where this episode lives. So I just think it was fabulously done in terms of like, it turned away from the biblical allusions and leaned hard into this stuff and did a great job doing it.
So while we're kind of in the religion/philosophy section, there's one point that I wanted to bring up about the idea of Lyra as Eve. Which is basically just that it makes so much more sense to me in the TV show than it did in the book because of the way that they kind of like juxtapose Mrs. Coulter talking about Eve and the fall, with Seraphina talking about the end of destiny and the return of free will, like right after each other, and how those two things are basically different interpretations of the same thing or like the same prophecy from two very different moral perspectives.
I disagree with what you're saying, but I can't talk about it outside of the spoilers, okay. So we'll talk about it there.
Okay.
It's funny because I was like, there's not really a lot of religion in this episode, but like you're pointing out is very much the thing, and how those are juxtaposed right next to each other and make really clear, like, these are the good guys, and this is what the bad guys think. I think what you thought in the book is exactly what Philip Pullman wants you to think. When
I see, like, he wants us to be confused.
Yeah, well, he wants you to have the idea that you've always heard about Eve and the Magisterium and Eve and sin and all of that. Like, Eve is bad, right? And that whole situation was bad. And so, like, to call Lyra that is like, whoa, what does that mean?
I see. Okay.
I never felt that way, but maybe that's just because of my completely unreligious upbringing. Because because Eve to me was never somebody bad. It was just a story,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really thought of Eve as bad, but I am aware that, like, that's how a lot of other people interpret her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard people say that, like, a big part of the reason why the fall happened was because she wasn't living correctly under the dominion of her husband. The first real sin was that she failed to obey her husband, and that led to her disobeying God. Like, I think that is like some really toxic, terrible stuff, to be clear. But that is like the kinds of things that you hear about Eve, right? That she, and that are built into women and are part of the reason why, we should be very suspicious of women and why women need to control themselves and all of the stuff that has been a big part of this season, and the way that Mrs. Coulter has been treated and explains a lot of, like, her circumstances, that gives tragedy to her bad choices. And, she's like trying to save her daughter from that in a certain sense. Like, she's got some very bad views. I feel bad for Coulter in the show in a lot of ways. I don't know.
No, so do I.
Definitely.
They've really changed her from, well, I really loved her in the books too, but for different reasons. They're really using her to show how fucked up it is in their world. and how that made her. While in the book, I feel like she was born an evil person. And as the story went on, she discovered other things were important to her also, which didn't stop her from being evil, which was important. But
yeah,
and that was her
another appetite.
Yeah. And in the show, they've decided to use her in a different way. Still very good and very evil and that sort of thing, but that the world is just a lot more complicated.
Yeah,
it's
she's
more
tragic.
Yeah. And I suppose I've always liked her as this sort of epitome of evil because it's fun. But I do also really love what they're doing with her in the show. So did we want to get into our whatever we haven't talked about yet? You know, our notes on
I've got
the
a few
episode.
things.
So
Mary and the Babes.
Oh yes, Mary and the Babbies.
Oh, Jesus.
So, how did we feel about Mary helping the kids? Because that's not in the book at all.
Yeah, because they're all dead in the show because Will and Lyra killed them.
Well, I don't...
And the witches, too.
Anyways, I don't think they do. Some of the kids survive. They don't kill all of them. Because the witches still,
just
like...
some of them get impaled on the stairs.
Yeah.
It's good.
I really liked it.
They don't kill them. They just leave them to starve with broken bones. It's not the same.
No, I really liked the bit with Mary and the kids because it shows Mary's empathy.
Well, go on then. Skedaddle.
You could come too. We like you, miss.
Well, that's very kind of you, but I'm afraid I can't.
Where are you going?
Well, I'm looking for answers, and I have a feeling that's where to look for them.
Bye, miss. Thank you.
I was delighted to help.
It's a good setup to Mary's continuing story.
And it literally continues the contrast between Coulter and Mary. They've had this for a long time, I feel like. And in an episode where she's like, I deliver you back to your parents and now return to my very important spiritual mission. And Mrs. Coulter is like, you're mine and I'm kidnapping you. The way, I don't know, those feel opposite to me.
Yeah, so I agree with you mostly. I don't think that this really negatively impacts the story. I like what it does for Mary, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like it is undermining one of Philip Pullman's points from the book, which is fine because it wasn't a point of the book that I particularly liked, but I think when he was writing Angelica and the Gaggle of Children, he was really trying to say something about how kids can also be evil. They're just as bad as adults. And he was trying to really impress that upon Lyra. And I think that message is lost in the book. Is lost in the TV show. I'm not sad about it, but I think it is worth pointing out.
It is lost, but it was definitely there as a part of Lyra growing up. And I just don't think it was needed in the show because they had Daphne Keane play Lyra more grown up than she was in the book.
Yeah.
You know?
I see.
That
it was character growth that wasn't needed because Lyra was already starting at a more evolved place.
Yeah.
And Will talked about it. With his mom and stuff. He says, some kids suck. They just are mean for no good reason.
Which is true.
Yep.
Other bits I want to cover quickly, just a few shout outs to some really good acting. Andrew Scott smashed it again.
Oh, God, yes.
Ruta Gedmintas, she's always excellent, and she really did it, again, very, very well this time. And then, obviously, every actor loves a death scene.
Yeah.
And Lin-Manuel Miranda and Cristela Alonso both did a fantastic job of that. I really loved how, even when it's kind of all going wrong, and Hester starts blaming herself for them being about to die, and then Lisa's like...
This is my fault, isn't it?
How do you figure?
I've always stopped you before.
You always pushed me.
Only when there's an adventure on the way.
Hester. There were always adventures.
How you figure? He knows exactly what she means, but he's not going to let her just say that and just have that there. He's like, no, come on, tell me. What do you mean? Go on.
That's that being honest with yourself. That's heartbreaking. When she turns to despair, that's when you really get worried and you're like, oh, not you, Hester. No.
I know.
Hester should have taken her own advice and think about bacon.
Think about bacon.
Anything.
That was fabulous. But then
loved it.
When Hester started getting sad, I hate sad Hester. I don't like that at all. And then when they talked about all the adventures they went on.
I know. I want to see more of them.
It's so good. And bacon was like a thing from the minute that Lee was in the first episode. Lyra stealing his bacon on the plate. They made bacon a theme. It's
never a cheesy theme either, which is what I really like about it. It's a bacony theme. But it's never overdone. It's never like overtly referenced in quite the same manner. It's just on the edge of being cheesy, and I love that about it. I thought
it's good
because Lee's a slightly cheesy character,
right? Yeah.
And that's kind of the joy of him. Other bits quickly. I loved Mary just kind of wandering around using the I Ching. Even though they aren't in the books, it makes so much sense to have them here.
No, it's in the book a little bit. It's in book 3.
Yes, of course. But yeah, also I just love that she has a thermos in her bag, just because it's such a sensible thing to take with you. But also at exactly the same time, that shit's going to be cold because she's been there at least a day.
Yeah.
So it's just something that if I were to be told, okay, you're going to go on a long expedition now, I'd be like, I need to dig out my thermos. That's going to be really useful. 2 other final bits. I preferred this way of John Parry and Will meeting. I just thought it was better in every way. I liked that Will was so hurt.
Emotionally hurt?
Yes, hurt by John not coming back. That's going to hurt a kid.
Yeah.
And he saw the effect it had on his mother, especially as John continues to be just but think of the bigger picture. And he doesn't really apologize for it.
No. I think it's so important that apology never happens.
How did you do it?
You owe me answers, Dad, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how hard Mum found it without you? Thinking you were dead.
I couldn't get back to you. I tried everything. And in trying, I got a better understanding of these strange worlds. An understanding that I could use to actually help people.
And you chose these people over your family?
No. I thought by helping them, I could help you. I'm talking about the end of this tyranny, Will, for you, for everyone. I've thought about you every day. But Will, if you're the knife bearer, you have a task ahead of you. The fate of many worlds may rest on you.
On me.
There's a war coming, Will. The greatest war there ever was. You must go to Lord Asriel and tell him that you have the only weapon in all the universes that can destroy the Authority, all right?
Oh, no, I don't want to. I hate it. I don't want anything to do with any of this.
You're the knife bearer, Will. If you don't use it against them, they'll tear it out of your hands and they'll destroy us. They'll have absolute power. I'm sorry, Will, but you must do this. You must do it.
And then we go home.
Then we'll go home. Right. Then we'll go home.
Lee made John promise to protect Lyra and to use, the knife bearer to that end. And the book makes a big deal about how there's a betrayal of that promise. I feel like that is not really happening here to the same degree.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there is a really big lie that happens in the middle of this that is a strong betrayal in exactly the thing that you're talking about. Yeah, I think I know you. So he asks him, he's like, and then we'll go home. And there's this whole thing that the actor does with his face.
Yes.
And then he's like, yeah, and then we'll go home. And you're like, you fucking liar.
Yeah.
And that is like their whole relationship. Oh, man.
I also really love that scene. I love that they didn't even try to have Will and John not recognize each other because it just wouldn't work on screen.
It was so dumb in the book.
Yeah, but
I'm so glad they didn't do any of that.
It does at least kind of work in a book because you don't see them physically looking at each other. You know what I mean? Although, again, the whole time it's like the alethiometer saying your father's up ahead, and then he runs into a dude. Use your brain, Will. But anyways.
Coming up on your left, trauma.
Yeah. But that's pretty much what they did in the show. It's like they heard what we were saying because Will was immediately like, my father was supposed to be up here. Is that you?
Is that you?
I really loved their interactions. They're both really good actors.
Yeah.
And it was great to see
Definitely.
their journey towards each other culminate in this one scene. And how John just immediately was like, where's your mom? How's your mom? You know, and that puts you on his side just a little bit.
But it also makes it not about him, you know, not about Will.
Yeah, that's true.
I think also Andrew Scott plays a troubled man very, very well. Like, he plays imperfection. And that is what John Parry is. He's resolved on what he wants to do and what he likes, and he's very upfront about it. It's just that those decisions kind of make him a piece of shit sometimes.
I will say the last line that they gave him was kind of dumb, where he says, the night is full of angels. It's the middle of the fucking day.
I think if we would have had the episode that we're missing, that whole thing would have hit better.
Well, he says it in the book too, but then like there are some angels there to tell Will that they will take him to Asriel, and that just doesn't happen here.
Yeah, right.
In the book, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, okay.
From what we saw, it would be like, are you talking about the meteorites, Dad? Up in the sky. I did see those. Yeah. Are those angels?
I did think, though, it was a better death for John.
Yeah, definitely.
It did make more sense, as we talked about earlier. It was a little bit quick, but it wasn't. It was still better than it was in the books, because I really disliked it in the books.
Yeah, I like that it was quick, because the whole point of them is that they don't get a chance to resolve their relationship.
Yes, yeah, fair. They kind of part as strangers.
Yeah.
Despite meeting.
They're supposed to be anticlimax. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I suspected, Will did put on the goofy jacket, so.
He did.
Yeah.
And he put up the hood and everything. I liked it.
It looked so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it looks great.
That was good. I wanted to call out the music the whole episode, the music was good, but specifically Lord Asriel's voice over there at the end. Fucking fabulous. Mm-hmm. I have gone all over the place in my notes, so I'm gonna go backwards now a little bit and say that the one thing I do think that they've done right with the witches is that they are scared of the specters, because that is the one thing that they can't fight. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I like that there is one thing in this world that can believably threaten the witches.
Yeah.
I really loved the bit where Lee and Groom and John are in the woods and the demon flies up overhead, although that's completely world-breaking. Why can that person's demon go so far away from them, but whatever. But then John is just like, that's not my demon. And then Lisa's like, run, and they go. I don't know, I just really loved that scene. It was well done. And then their very emotional goodbye between John and Lee, I thought that was very well done. And we talked about this scene earlier, but I wanted to bring up the scene where Lyra and Pan are talking about how they're changing and growing up, basically, but they have the bit of the Jordan College theme playing in the background, but it sounds very different. Ooh, I thought that was
didn't notice that.
That was such a good choice.
I don't think anyone ever is.
if you're going to talk about the music, you should talk about the end. Like the credits.
Yeah.
Yes, the end
Yes.
credits. Okay, so I genuinely think they did that on purpose because I stayed watching the end credits because I was like, oh, it's the opening credits theme, but different and really cool. And that's why I watched to the end of the credits. I was like, oh shit, there's a scene. Oh my god.
It does.
It is, yes.
I did not watch to the end of the credits, and I did not see the scene until you told me to go back and watch it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No problemo. It was really good, and we can't talk about it, obviously. But we do see Roger, who's dead, somewhere in darkness.
I did notice in this episode this thing of like the locations that I think is super interesting, where the episode begins. We talked about this with the witches in a cave, and Lyra started the whole season in a cave, and of course we have the computer that's in a cave. This makes me think of Plato's cave. We talked about that a little bit in the book, and how that a little bit and how that's like a symbol for ignorance. And then you kind of come out of the cave and you learn the truth, and then you can never go back. Even if you go back into the cave, you know that like, oh, this is all not real, right? You lost your innocence, basically. They're like traveling through these slot canyons that are halfway between being outside in the open and being a cave. They're like emerging into, like knowledge or something. Like that's how I saw the setting being used, because anytime that we're back in a cave, then it starts to be about like ignorance again. Like when Mary is reading the I Ching, she's using the cave, right? The computer, that's her laptop version of the cave, is the I Ching. And when Serafina lies to Ruta, it's in a cave, and sends her out without the full knowledge of, I'm pretty sure I know what this Æsahættr thing is, and I don't want you to have it. Like when Will puts on the mantle, he is fully like out of the canyon walls. He's like standing up on a hill in the light. It's like he's kind of apexed out of ignorance. You know what I mean? And Lyra getting stuffed into a box, is a kind of cave thing of like, go back to being innocent, my innocent. You can't do that. You can't go back into the cave because it's too late. You're already changing. She knows too much.
You're so nice to these people. Whenever like you go into these in-depth, like they must have chosen this because of this, blah, 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 blah. Oh. I'm like, or the designers just thought it looked cool.
It looked cool. I mean, it
like,
can.
You give them way more credit than I ever give them.
I don't mean to say that they did it on purpose, because I definitely think this is me on my bullshit and I'm like seeing too much. It doesn't have to be them doing it on purpose for it to be real, is what I mean. Before
we go into our overall thoughts on season 2, I did also just want to say that, yay, we've been greenlit for season 3. Well, not we, but
Yay!
The show has been. And there's going to be 8 episodes. I mean, COVID notwithstanding. Although we'll probably have to wait longer for it because of COVID. So
probably.
That's unfortunate, but, what can we do? It's 2020.
So what did we think of season 2 overall?
It's terrible. Throw it out.
Okay, so Alan's ridiculous notwithstanding, I'm going to go first by saying what I think everybody will guess is like, what a huge improvement.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know if it was that they listened to the criticism or they just realized what they had done wrong or something, that the bits that they wanted to land weren't landing with people, so they made changes that they needed to change, but huge improvement over season 1. Great music. Witches aside, everything was fabulous.
Yeah, I think part of what made this season better was just the demon work was so much better. Yeah. Not in terms of like visually how the demons were executed, but just in terms of the role that they played in the scenes, how much character work was done through the demons. Like the demons were, this was our main complaint about season 1, was that the demons were really invisible. It just made the world building not work as well as it did in the book.
Yeah, it was confusing if you didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, and they completely fixed that this season. So great job with that. And then also, I think there's just less action going on this season. The pacing of season 1, I think, was hurt a little bit by the fact that they had to fit so much into 8 episodes. And I think season 2 just like breathed a lot more because there weren't as many plot points that had to happen, that had to get done. You know, there were so many different sets in season 1. Jordan College, then London, then Bolvanger.
Every episode is a different location.
Svalbard. Yeah, it was like they put so much energy and money, I'm sure, into the production side of things in season 1. There was so much more going on than in this episode because the story was a bit smaller. They were able to, I think, sit back and just like approach it in a better way.
Yeah. They also book 2 is shorter than book 1, and they had some of book 2 in season 1. So I think that gave them a lot of leeway to really focus, because there was a lot of character stuff added, especially between Lyra and Will, that added so much to the story. You really cared about what they were going to decide to do, and you could really feel Lyra's, oh, I've got a new friend now. Let's hope I don't fuck him over.
Right.
And then she kind of does fuck him over, and it was really good. Sorry.
Watching Will and Lyra's relationship grow over the course of season 2 was just so rewarding.
And it's part of what was missing for us for Roger, because we didn't, the first episode is so fast, and that's all we get of of Lyra and Roger. It doesn't feel as emotionally impactful, for her to be off trying to save him. And, when they're reunited in Bolvanger, it's sweet, but it's very informed in a way that Will and Lyra isn't.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm not even that mad that we lost the Asriel episode.
It's more true to the book.
I just loved the voiceovers this episode so much. I felt like it gave me everything that I needed to know about what Asriel has been doing.
Yeah.
I think that part of what you're saying too is a consequence of the structures of the books. Book 1 is really an adventure story, and book 2 is a little bit more of a thriller in a way.
Mm-hmm.
There's just more room to explore stuff, literally.
Yeah, I also think maybe the production team realized that you don't need an adventure for it to be interesting, because they fucked up the adventure a little bit,
I mean, partially they just spent their budget right. They didn't dump it all into a part of the book, which actually wasn't that impressive. They drove away from the mistakes of the Golden Compass movie and focused on the things which actually mattered to us, to us as the kind of reviewers here, to the general public, from what I heard from talking to people, and just to the book. The demons are so much more important, and giving them enough effort and enough time really, really paid off. And also, they just didn't need to introduce the whole world and all the characters this time, which gave them an easier job as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they smashed
that's a good point.
It was brilliant.
I saw, when I was watching the finale, a lot of parallels between the season 1 finale and season 2 finale, in terms of their structure. In the finale of the first season, Mrs. Coulter comes into the science cabin, and this is where Lyra was sleeping, and then she does that in this one too. And then she goes and tracks her down out in the wilderness the same way, as in the season 1 finale. I think the reason that you do parallel structure in terms of writing and storytelling and stuff like that is to invite comparison. And so you can kind of show the themes that are happening, but also the way that things have changed. And so that, it tells you about the growth of the characters. Lyra confronting Asriel on the mountaintop versus Will confronting his father, that's very parallel. And the Magisterium attacking Lee and Hester is just like when the Magisterium attacks the bears, and the bears stay there and, fight off the Magisterium so that Lyra has the cover to climb the mountain without getting overtaken by those forces. Just in the story beats, there's a lot of parallel structure going on. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So overall, 2 thumbs up for season 2.
At least 2.
So yeah, I think we're going to move on to our spoiler section, but we're going to take a bit of a break, and mostly because Caitlin has other podcasts she has to do. And then we will be back for The Amber Spyglass, the book.
Okay, well, if you'd like to avoid spoilers, then now is the time to say goodbye. Otherwise, stick around after the outro. We are going to take a nice long break, but at some point before season 3 airs, we will be back in order to talk about book 3, The Amber Spyglass. So keep us in your feeds for that. If you've enjoyed our coverage of season 2, please take the time to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It's the best way for new listeners to find us. I'm Anya, and you can follow me on Twitter at StrangelyLiteral. That's strangely, then Literl.
I'm Caitlin, and you can follow me on Twitter at InferiorCaitlin.
I'm Francis, and you can follow me on Twitter at Francis Windrum.
Follow the show on Twitter at MOTPod. If you need more than 280 characters to speak your mind, send your emails to contact@hallowedgroundmedia.com.
And now, the spoilers. Dun dun dun.
Everyone special!
So, before we get into everything else, the Eve thing, the Eve and the end of Destiny, I've always thought were two completely different things. So, she's Eve, so the end of Destiny is her and Will going into the world of the dead and opening up a way for them to get out.
Right.
Yes. Okay, I definitely got that.
And and Eve is when she and Will fix the dust problem.
Oh.
Just get out the vacuum cleaner,
Yes.
run it around a bit, fix the dust problem,
because that's
end of sin.
Exactly.
How do they fix the dust problem? By closing all the windows and not cutting
but
anymore.
Before they close the windows, when they go off on their looking for the demons, but actually they're like, yeah, we love each other, let's make out. That's when
I actually was thinking about that as I was rewatching today, and I was like, I love Daphne Keane, I love Amir Wilson, I love the way they portray the friendship.
I don't want to see them kiss.
I'm not sure if I want to see them make out in a forest.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes, I guess. I don't.
That was Caitlin disagreeing with you.
No, I don't think I disagree either. But I think it's just because they're so young.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think this is just a consequence of you being an adult.
Maybe it's good that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. But they will be older when they film season 3, so they have that going for them.
Again, it's like the end of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Where Arya suddenly has a sex scene. You're like, what the fuck? She's like 10, but she's like 10 when they did the first season, and she's actually grown up quite a bit since then. But you see her as this child character, and so you're like, no.
So since I'm older than all of you, it's like it's not like the actor's age. It's just like as you get older, you're like, oh, these people are so much younger than me, and this is a little. Like, I'm used to being kind of switched on by these kind of scenes, but now these are like kids and it's gross. It's like, just get used to that because it's going to happen more the older you get.
Oh no.
Sorry, but like fucking reality, you know? Watch movies about old people making out. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm fine. Genuinely, I'm fine.
You know, and actually now that we're framing it this way, I'm totally fine with Roger being like a way older if Daphne Keane and Amir Wilson also appear older.
Yeah. But anyways, the scene where she literally offers him fruit and then they make out and then and afterwards the dust in the air is attracted to them and it's coming down more instead of floating away into the windows. Right. That's the scene where she has Eve's quote unquote fall, because that means that they're attracting knowledge and everything to the people, but it's because of them. Because the dust is attracted to the two of them.
So they attract way more dust than regular people who have sex.
Well, I don't think they have sex in the book. But
well, no. But I mean, like.
But yes, that's what's happening.
In terms of the fall,
there's something about the two of them that dust is more attracted to, and so even if the windows hadn't been closed, a good portion of the problem would have been fixed.
Okay, see, I think I missed that on my read through The Amber Spyglass, so thank you for pointing that out.
I mean,
for when we reread it. And when I said regular people having sex, I don't mean that like they have had sex, but there are many people in existence who have had sex,
right?
And so why would they not attract dust in the same way?
Sorry, I specifically said what I said because a lot of people think Will and Lyra do have sex at the end of The Amber Spyglass, and I disagree. So that's why I said that, but we'll get there. let's talk about the end of the Amber Spyglass when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah. After we've started the Amber Spyglass, which is not now.
Yes.
At least we've gone hard into the spoiler.
Yes, really.
Oh yeah. We do announce it. It's fine.
So I also just want to say that I loved getting that glimpse of Roger in the world of the dead and how they did those bits. So good. I'm really, really excited for season 3.
It's going to be wicked. I really think so.
Yeah. And a scene that I wanted to talk about in the main, but I couldn't really talk about it without getting into spoilers. I just want the scene where Will and Lyra are talking about how they just called each other their best friends, like they acknowledge that conversation they had at night. I really just think that shouldn't have happened.
Why not?
Because in the books, they don't talk about it until that scene that we were just talking about at the very end of the Amber Spyglass.
The one where they don't have sex in the woods.
Yes, exactly. And they...
The defining moment of that scene is that they don't have sex.
Yeah.
Great.
Different kind of anticlimax. Yeah.
So, Jesus. And I liked in the books where they sort of both acknowledged what they were feeling, but they didn't talk about it at all until much, much later. And I loved the scene in the show. It was a good scene. It was well done. I just think it changes the impact of that nighttime talk that Will and Pan had. That's all. And I just wanted to bring it up.
That's interesting.
I'm going to use nighttime talk as a euphemism from now on.
Yes, I was going to say.
I really liked the Azrael voiceover. It shows how much that he thinks he matters and how he kind of does matter, but not in the same way that he thinks.
Yeah.
Because I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but do we see Azrael getting the 2 angels on board and sending them after Will and Lyra in the book, or do the angels just show up?
So Balthazar and the other one, I don't remember his name, the angels that end up traveling with Will.
When I hear the word Balthazar, all I can think of is like that giant, disgusting tub demon from Buffy.
Yeah, that's fair.
But please go
but
on.
not him, an angel.
Yeah, not him.
So they show up to guide Will to Azrael in order to impress Azrael. It's something that they thought of doing on their own to show that they're important and to do a big help for Azrael.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So the TV show gives the impression that, like, Azrael is being very important for, like, getting the angels on board. The angels are going to be really crucial to helping Will and Lyra in book 3. So, like, Azrael is important, but as more of a helper and facilitator, as opposed to, in the book, it really seems like what he's doing does not matter at all.
Well, I mean, we can talk about more of whether or not what Azrael is doing matters. It matters in some ways. Like, it matters in that they realize it's not going to work.
This is like the whole, I mean, you mentioned like Aragorn earlier, Francis. It's like how what Aragorn is doing is important but not important at all. Like, you know, like it's distracting the correct people who need to be distracted so that the real heroes can get the job done, you know.
I see. So Will and Lyra are Frodo and Samwise.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now it's weird.
Azrael's Aragorn.
Who don't have sex. Yes. Yeah. No, it all lines up. So, yeah, kind of.
I mean, we're going to read this book. It's all things that
exactly.
we're going to talk about.
We don't need to break down.
Sorry. I'm probably just dragging this conversation down because I've only read The Amber Spyglass once that I remember. But I'm excited to revisit it with you guys.
Me too. It's been a while since I cried at the ending. So, you know, it'll be a good time. Just like a quick aside that I'm really excited to see Lee and John in the world of the dead. But I'm so sad that we never get to see Hester again and that she's gone for good.
Yeah.
Maybe they will make a different decision on that.
They better not, because that changes everything about the plot.
Yeah, that would be a huge change. Do you think they're going to do with Lee's body what happens like on screen?
Have Yorick eat him?
Yeah. Are we going to do that? Is he going to have a leather burger? I'd be like, I want bacon with this for my friend.
Look,
Oh,
I don't
God.
think so. Not because it would be graphically violent on screen, but just because the geography of how the world pass-through thingy works and where physically Lee is completely different than it was in the book. So Yorick just would not easily be able to get to him.
One of the things I really like about the whole story is that, like, he does the thing, Philip Pullman does the thing that happens in fantasy, where it's like, at the beginning of the story, you give somebody, like, here's your get out of jail free card. And then, like, they pull that card at the crucial moment, and then Deus Ex Machina happens, and they're good, and that doesn't happen for Lee. She shows up just in time to not be useful, and which is great. But she's like, when she's there, she's like, preserve this vessel. She's like casting a spell on him. And I was like, oh yeah, so that Yorick doesn't have to eat rotted meat, right? That's why we're doing that. Like, I was trying to figure out what the point is. I mean, she could carry him back through.
Yeah, if they do that, that might happen. I was thinking that she might carry him to Yorick and be like, yo, your friend's dead. You want to eat him?
Snack.
Or would she be surprised? It would be like, thank you for giving my friend. It's like, what are you doing? Oh my God.
Jesus Christ, Yorick.
I know, I didn't have time to get the bacon. He would have liked that. But
I don't think she'd be surprised because they're both creatures of the North. You know, like, I think they probably have a better understanding of each other's culture than the humans do.
She's just looking at Lee, just like, he looks tasty. Fry him up.
She's like, wish I could do that. No. We get into the ethics of cannibalism. Good. No.
Is it cannibalism? Are the witches human?
I would say no. Not cannibalism.
Yeah. Definitely weird, though.
Would it matter for the prion disease?
Oh, yeah.
Would it matter for the kuru?
It would really depend on the alleles they have at that locus. Because, I mean, heterozygote humans are protected from kuru, so I don't know if witches are fixed for one form or the other. Yeah. That's like the whole Hardy Weinberg
Texas kuru
thing. No, because if you look in cultures that traditionally engaged in ritual cannibalism have like
Texas.
50...
Like Texas. Yeah.
No. There's some... I think they're Pacific Island or... I don't know. Anyway, they are specifically like 50-50% for each form of the allele, and if you measure among older adults, heterozygotes are actually overrepresented for what you would expect. They're like over 50%.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that is one of the examples we used to teach for like seeing things being out of Hardy Weinberg and inferring selection from that.
This was not on my bingo card of like, Anya knows lots about cannibalism.
No, because I used to teach this. Anyway, yeah. But if you look at most cultures that did not engage in cannibalism, they have, I forget which form, but like one form of the allele comes to dominate, and just through like genetic drift.
But I am very curious if a BBC show is going to be like, if it will be implied eating, if it will be on screen eating, or if it will be no eating. I'm interested in where they go.
What I love about this is that I'm sure Lin-Manuel Miranda would be so fucking excited to have a bear eat him.
Super excited. He would want it to happen.
Fuck
yeah.
Yeah.
He'll be pushing for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if he wasn't then, by the time he's listened to this podcast, he will.
Yep. So something that they kind of cut out of the show was John dying, like being near death before all that happened. He was sick, and they kind of
right. Yes,
and weak and stuff. And so I interpreted that like if they wanted to hint toward it at all, because they do have to, as him realizing that he's not living long because of the sickness that you get from living in another world.
So I've been wondering about this, if they're just going to get rid of that.
Then why wouldn't Lyra go live in Will's world at the end?
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, okay, so this gets back to the whole thing that Anya was saying about like shot in the ankle and now it's not a choice anymore. You have to do it. Like if you're signing up to die by hanging out in someone else's world, that's not really a choice. You know, like I guess you could do that and it would be tragic and bad. But like if you could live in each other's world and have a whole life, but then it is a choice to do that or not. You know what I mean?
No, I do, but what's the point of having Lyra make that choice? I get that Will has to go back to his world because his mom needs somebody to take care of him, or take care of her, you know, and that is a very big part of Will's character, that he loves his mom a lot and he wants to take care of her. Lyra's got shit all holding her to her world. So if they take that out, there is no fucking reason why she wouldn't just choose to spend the rest of her life with Will.
Become a housewife to Will.
Well, she would never do that.
I know.
So
I was just saying it in the most worst way I can.
No, I think that Lyra would want to go and stay in Willworlds anyway, just so she could become a scholar.
Or does she have to go back to make scholarship possible, or dismantle the magisterium, or...
But
you know,
Lyra's
she's
never
done
cared
enough.
about that. Yeah.
She doesn't need to do any more labor.
They've done a really good job of like integrating the world building, you know, from like the beginning. Yeah. But we haven't seen this element of it. And so it makes me wonder if it is an element anymore. And so if it's not, like, there are implications for how that could change, you know, the story.
Yeah. The thing is, if they have that not be a thing and Lyra just chooses to go back to her world, I will fucking hate that.
Just a warning, Bad Wolf.
But it would be like, because it's literally like she could go somewhere where she could study and do anything she wanted and be with Will. Like the very last line in the book is you have to build it where you are. You know, you have to build your own good life where you are. And why would she choose to have a shit life? All right, let's wrap this up. We've blathered on about stuff we're gonna get to later long enough. So thank you everyone for sticking with us through all of our blatherings through season 2. We will be back for the Amber Spyglass, and don't forget to steal the mantle off your dead father's body.
I was watching this show called His Dark Materials, and I was like, wow, the sound is really good, and I turned it way up. So
sounds
I never
good.
turned it back down.
We should watch that.
Yeah, we should do a show about that one when we're done this.
Yeah, definitely.
God, everybody wants to make podcasts. It's the worst.
At least we actually do it rather than just saying, man, I wish we could make a podcast. We should really do that. That'd be a great idea.
I should actually have that a little more often. That where I just sort of think about it and then don't do it.
And then don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd make my life a little bit easier. Everybody went?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. That was quicker. That was quick for us. Anyways,
I know we're like basically it's 6 minutes.
Yeah,
incredible.
6 minutes in, 2 minutes of fucking around, and we've already done the favorite parts.
There's nothing to talk about when it's good. Because that's where she lives, is like that edge. Yeah. She's. I made it bad there. I didn't mean to, but like that. Yeah, that's interesting.
I will just.
So that was just Anya's favorite part.
I know, right?
So now we did general feelings in 6 minutes, and then we spent over 10 minutes talking about my favorite part. So you're welcome.
About how we joked about killing Philip Pullman with COVID.
Yeah, specifically Francis giving Philip Pullman COVID.
It's like, how the fuck did we get there?
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's a wild ride here.
Yeah.
We are. This is why we don't have any sponsors.
Well, I feel like I just want to say that the death toll was much smaller at that point when we recorded.
Yeah,
true. That's true.
It was humor to deal with we were all very anxious.
Yeah.
I mean, him getting shot in the ankle is clearly making him into Achilles, which is a reference to... No, that's real. That's not true.
Okay.
I can't do that. I'm sorry.
Especially, I mean, well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, why were they in a volcano? Where did that come from?
I don't even care about that. You know, it was kind of visually interesting. Sometimes you just make a visually interesting decision on screen. That's weird. Fine with me. But the whole scene was useless, stupid, and wrong.
It was also me never to upset you, Caitin.
It was also.
I like that this whole page is Alan's color.
Oh no!
Like my whole screen is red right now.
I'm sorry. It's just me writing my shit out. It was really good. Why didn't she see Terrence Stamp's corpse up there and be like, "Who's this guy? What's going on here?" Because they couldn't afford Terrence Stamp. That's why. For 2 episodes.
That sounds like a religion. Hold on, I got chocolate in my mouth. Never mind, I ruined it. Carry on. I was gonna say
Walt Disney's religion. Yeah, I constantly bring the Star Wars bullshit into it, but it's like, you know, like Darth Vader is more fun when he is not like sad Vader, you know, like. And like Mrs. Coulter is a little sad Vader in the TV show.
Oh yeah, my favorite Darth Vader scene is in Rogue One where he just plows everyone down.
Yeah.
Like
That's
I will look that scene up on YouTube sometimes and just be like, ah yes, give me that good lightsaber death.
That's the one Star Wars movie that I haven't seen.
It genuinely might be my favorite.
Yeah, I've heard it's the best one.
I know.
But yeah,
that's interesting because I know a lot of people hate it. But
they're wrong.
I love when you go into the ending. I remember the very first time we were in theaters and they're all like going down to that planet at the end, and I thought to myself, God, I hope they all die. And
yeah, exactly.
You know, I literally thought, I hope they all go out doing this, and then they did, and it was fucking fabulous.
There's nothing better than killing off your entire fucking cast.
Yeah.
Caitlyn's like, that's my favourite part of the book, when they all die.
I think we've talked
Batman
about how that
heroism.
is not my favorite part of the book, but and then
and Lee needed a friend.
Yeah.
Who left him in the woods to die. Yeah.
And
because he asked him to. It's fine.
Before you do that, can I talk about one more specific thing in this?
No.
And then we'll...
Get off my podcast.
Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry.
Yes,
I won't
of course.
Be quiet now. But like a golden monkey, I will be silent.
All right. What do you want? What are you talking?
No.
Stop making her feel like Coulter.
No.
Oh no! Keep making me feel. Like
yeah, do that.
Please
do that. Death of the author. Kill all the authors. Kill the authors.
Yep. we also talked about that in our book episode on this section.
Anyway, that was
we did.
That was my specific thing to this episode.
Yeah.
I was thinking. I was specifically thinking of the what is it called? The fucking Tesseract story.
Yeah.
Where she becomes a housewife to. It's not the wind in the willows. Why is that in my head? That's not what it is. Anyway, sorry.
Wrinkle in Time.
Yes.
Wrinkle in Time. Good.
Thank you. That was bothering the fuck out of me.
The repository of knowledge, as always.